Hi, this is Jedi Amanda. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know how you can design and win your very own Bernina Dream Studio. Just check out berninasweepstakes.com. When I designed mine, I had to have that foot tower in there. See for yourself. It was super cool. And get in today to win Bernina's Dream Studio $100,000 giveaway at berninasweepstakes.com. Dream it, design it, win it.
Welcome to So-and-So, brought to you by Bernina, made to create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with a special member of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Our guest today is Alex Anderson, who embraced her self-named Quilt Life more than 4 decades ago. Alex has a degree in art from San Francisco State University. A 2008 Silver Star Award winner, her 30 books have sold more than 1 million copies, inspiring quilters worldwide. She's designed patterns and fabric and helped develop innovative products to enhance the quilting experience. And for 11 years, she's hosted the popular cable TV show Simply Quilts. In 2007, with Ricky Timms, who has also been a guest on this podcast, she co-founded thequiltshow.com, the world's first full-service interactive online video web TV show, and soon after, an award-winning quilting lifestyle magazine. Most importantly to her, Alex is a teacher, and her mission remains to educate and encourage both new and experienced quilters, ensuring this beloved tradition passes seamlessly to succeeding generations. Alex has 2 children, 4 grandchildren, and lives in Northern California with her husband. Hi, Alex, and welcome to So-and-So.
Meg, I am delighted to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I've really been looking forward to this, as you are a notable personality in the quilting world, and I'm going to jump right in and just say we know that sewing in its forms has been a lifelong passion for you. How did you learn how to sew?
You know, it's funny. I, sent you a picture when I was a little girl at my grandma's knee, and I don't remember that. I was a little girl. I remember doing like needlepoint and things like that, embroidery, when I was in grade school. But when I was just prior to junior high, my best friend, Sarah Schroyer's mom, taught me how to sew. And I fell in love with the process to the point of I got a sewing machine for 8th grade graduation. It has always been in my blood. I love it. I do believe it skips generations, though.
It does. It does. Now, let me ask you, do you remember one of the first things that you sewed?
Oh, yes. It was the it was the classic sleeveless shift with a zipper down the back. Now, I don't know what I sewed with Mrs. Schroyer, but this is fast forward to, home economics in junior high. Mm-hmm. And what was so great about garment sewing or sewing an apron or whatever is that close enough is good enough. So for instance, no matter that I sewed the arm facing into the neck facing, that's why you just take scissors and trim it and get it where you need to go. I want to put straight out there, pretty much everybody knows this. I have dyslexia, so reading is difficult. So putting things down on paper is difficult / high school. Okay. I always thought perhaps I was a little bit on the slow side, and dyslexia had not really been identified at that point. So I ended up sewing my way through high school. So for example, we were doing something on Greek mythology. What am I going to do? I decided to sew a dress that a goddess would have worn. And that got me an A. So I learned very quickly how to shift my deficiencies into wonderful opportunities.
You know, most kids in high school make plaster of Paris landscapes, and you were sewing Greek goddess uniforms.
Yes,
That's great.
Exactly.
Alex, your first quilt studio was a guest bedroom. How did that happen?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so I belong to East Bay Heritage Quilters, EBHQ, it's known. It's a very, very vibrant guild, and was then. I took a class from Nancy Crow. There were like 30 of us in there in the guild class. And I was just embarking on my quilting experience. And I said to Nancy, because we all only got 10 minutes with her because there were so many people in the class. I said, I can, this is like the back of my hand. I can remember. I looked up at her and I said, how do I get people to take me seriously as a quilter? Because, I was a, in quotes, quilter.
Sure.
And she said, well, how serious do you take yourself as a quilter? Well, that was an interesting turn of a question. And then she said, so for example, where do you sew? And I said, well, in the guest bedroom. So right there, I've put myself in second position over that room. You know what I'm saying?
Interesting. Yes.
And she said, she looked at me and she said, how often do you use your living room? Now, in our house at the time, the first room you walked into was the living room. And I looked at her and it was like, well, really not that much. So she goes, claim your space. You are owed that space, claim your space. So I went home that night and I was just happily working on my project. And John came in and I was literally standing on the guest bed to get to the design wall. Yes, I had one, had one then. And I said, you know what, John, no worries. I'm going to move the studio into the living room tomorrow. The next day, the guest bed was gone. And at that point, wherever we went, I claimed my space. And the thing is, I've worked with enough quilters. It doesn't have to be this glorious grand space. It can be a closet. It can be a corner. It can be anywhere in your house, but claim your space. I'm sticking to that story.
That's some really good advice for people. And as you said, you took second position to a room, and then I bet you took yourself more seriously as a quilter after that, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And we moved a couple times. And let me tell you, the very first thing I would look in a house is, where's my space? And the kids knew it too. And my husband, but my husband's a real fast learner.
Now let's talk about when you discovered what you called the quilt life. You said that you felt you had found your home. How did that happen for you?
I don't know exactly. All along, I've been in mini groups with really fabulous human beings. And oftentimes, my senior back then, now I'm kind of moving into the senior group. But I remember driving, I can't remember whose house it was, or it's not even important. And I went, oh my God, this is where I belong. This is where I fit. It feels so good here. When you walk into your home or your space and your heart just explodes, that's what it felt like. I found my home. And interestingly, that home has shifted. The things I love about that home, I need to say, has shifted as this journey has gone into 40 years, which I think is interesting and probably why people don't get tired of the sport. Things change.
Sure. Now explain to us, what is the quilt life?
That's a great question. I'll tell you a story. When my son was at UC Santa Barbara, he got really, really sick. And somebody that I kind of knew lived in the Santa Barbara area, and she went and rescued him and did the mom things that I was not there to do. And my son said, I can't go anywhere without people not knowing you're a quilter. And so I think living the quilt life now is everything I do integrates one way or another into my creative process. And the quilt life for me doesn't just stop with quilts at this point. I'm doing a lot of handwork, a lot of needlework. I'm actually doing some painting. It's creative endeavors that always drive me back to my fabric and what can I create. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It does. It does. So many people on this podcast, Alex, have talked about the community, and that's why we're here to
Yes.
talk about this, and that makes sense. Now, you said that throughout the years, your favorite things about quilting have changed. How so?
Well, that is a really interesting question, and I'm thrilled that this is being sponsored by BERNINA. Okay. I remember when I got my first BERNINA, and that would have been 40 years ago. I was beside myself with delight. I did not have the money to buy it. My dad and I had a quilt frame business, so I took a loan out against the business and got it. And I was beyond delighted that I had a Bernina. Then it moved to the fabric. and then
Mm-hmm.
and then it moved to being published. I mean, these little jolts of wonderfulness that come into your life. Then it moved to better creative spaces. I mean, it's interesting because first it's this, then it's this, then it's this, then it's this. And where I'm at now is it is the community. And it's funny that you have said that. I find that quilters, though we're all different ages, different sizes, different shapes, different colors, different areas in the world, thank you, the internet, we are
Mm-hmm.
of one. And I've really never met a quilter that has let me down. We come at things differently, but I love my community. I am so blessed with my community. And with that, I mean our community.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a quilt business with your dad. Tell us
Mhm.
about that.
So, when I was a senior in college and found that I was a unit short from graduation, 1 month prior to graduation, I went to my counselor, who happened to be a weaver, and weaving was highly regarded and respected at San Francisco State. And I said, listen, I just did a paper on quilting. I knew nothing about quilting. It was about American folk art tradition. We had to pick a tradition from some culture anywhere in the world, and I chose quilting. And I said to my advisor, look, I just did this paper for another class. Would you mind if I finished a quilt that my grandma started in the 30s?
Mm.
And yeah, and I had 1 month, people. And she, during Christmas, can I mention
Oh,
that?
no. Oh,
I
no.
was pregnant. I didn't know.
Just keep adding on.
Keep adding on. Yeah. And she said, yeah. And so my grandma shipped me her grandma's flower garden quilt that she started during her, I think, hysterectomy. And women didn't talk about that. And though I thought I was going to be a weaver for life, I found myself drawn to quilting.
Mm-hmm.
I graduated. I made it. It ended up being the size of a bath mat. And also, after I graduated, when I was pregnant, I was taking a class, an French tapestry workshop class in San Francisco, Aubusson. And I would come home at night and I would sit at the frame. So no matter where my creative endeavors were pointing me, I would come back to quilting.
Mm-hmm.
And that was that was my birth.
Do you still have that quilt?
Oh, of course I do.
You do. Good.
Yeah. Yes, I
That's
do.
awesome. Now, over the years, you've said that your central focus has been to understand fabric relationships, and you have an intense appreciation of traditional quilts and beautiful
Mhm.
quilting surface design.
Mhm.
Tell us more about this.
So when I found out that I kind of loved quilting, I learned that there was a woman in our area named Lucy Hilti. She's deceased. She was Mennonite, and she didn't care so much about the piecing or this or that. She cared about sitting at the frame and quilting. She cared about drawing beautiful feathers and cables, et cetera, et cetera. And at the same time, my senior year, I did that was after I graduated, but that December, I also had a class with a woodworking class with Dr. John Cassay, and he was a shaker expert. And I knew nothing about these, gosh, the word isn't French, but these different religions. I had no knowledge of these different religions like
Mm-hmm.
Amish, Shaker, and all that. And my strength is in graphic design. When I saw what they were doing, I flipped my lid. They were so graphic. They were so beautiful. We were ushered by Esprit, had their headquarters here. We could go look at the wool quilts, et cetera. Julie Silber was the curator. And I was just drawn to that. And so I would sit and quilt on these Amish style quilts, with plain fabric, and they would come to life. They would breathe as I put in the stitches.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I started Oh, the other thing that would happen during that time, and if you're a new quilter, hey, I get it. I would walk into the quilt store. It was the Cotton Patch, which is still in existence in Lafayette, California. And I could choose 3 fabrics, but I couldn't go farther than that. I was stuck. So when I wrote so here I am in love with the Amish quilting and all that, but I really was afraid of fabric relationships. I mean, my thought was, well, just buy a bunch and throw it in the quilt. And if it's ugly, nobody will pick out that bad fabric. I wrote my first book and I realized there really was a rhyme and reason on how I chose fabric and what gave my quilts a unique look, which I didn't even know I had at the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned studying with Lucy Hilti.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most important lesson she taught you?
Beautiful quilting.
Mm-hmm.
I look at quilts, and I'm going to probably step into a bomb right here, where everybody, pieces it, yay. They ship it off, or they run to their machine, and they just, honestly, in my book, destroy the quilt. And so I learned my most important lesson from her was the integrity of the quilting is as important as the piecing, applique, creating process.
That makes sense.
That's a good question, by the way.
Well, we all have inspiration and teachers, and you had mentioned Lucy, and it seems like she certainly left an indelible mark in your quilting. Now, you also talked about kind of your brand or how you quilt or your look. If someone were to say, Alex Anderson, her quilts are fill in the blank.
Because I've changed now, and people would not guess a lot of the quilts I'm making right now are from me.
Mm-hmm.
How would I describe my brand? Well, how it was then when I did all those books and I did things for other people's books is very different than what I'm doing now. And I know we'll get to this, that slash because I'm taking so many classes and enjoying it. But I would say my quilts would have been, you would look at them and you would see there are traditional roots to them, but they are highly colorful and extremely playful when it comes to fabric. Not afraid of fabric anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's a good thing. And the relationships, and you know how to put them together now.
Right. Like what makes what work. And I think the number one thing that people mess up is understanding light, medium, dark. And once you get that, you're A-okay. But I took a class from Kay Fassett. That's not how he works, which is why it is so important that you take classes from different people so it can only expand your personal vocabulary and tool belt with what's possible.
Mm-hmm. So let's continue on the theme. You mentioned Lucy Hilti. You mentioned Kay Fassett, who has also been on this podcast. Ricky Timms, you two worked together. How did you meet?
Well, that is a great question. I really don't quite remember how exactly we met, but I believe it was at a Martha Pullen seminar. And he was a baby at that point in the quilting world. And Martha put me, I think it was Jenny Beyer, Ricky, and myself. And he did it in the order of, I believe Jenny Beyer went first, then Ricky went, and then I went, and he stole the show. He will remind you there were 7 standing ovations or something like that.
But who was counting, right?
I was counting, and I said to Martha Pullen after, I said, if you ever put me after him, ever, I will talk bad about your mother, okay? And you and everything bad I can think of. He stole the show. So that's kind of my first introduction to him. Oh, also seeing him perform at AQS. But the other thing that I found really unique about Ricky was that we would meet in odd places, and I trusted him, and we could sit in a corner and talk about the nuts and bolts and the business of quilting. And he was not at all shy to share, nor was I. I mean, starting with what do you charge, but then it becomes more complex than that. We were at an AQS event together. He left his cowboy hat and I made sure that somehow it got to him at the airport. There was just a respect there. Were we BFFs? I mean, not even close, but that's the nature of this business. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So, I wanted to ask you, what's it like to work with him? It sounds like you have a very close relationship with him as far as trust and everything. Just the work that you two do together. What's it like to produce one of your shows?
Well, we've certainly come a long way, I will say, at thequiltshow.com. But the interesting thing, and the reason I think it works so well, is because honestly, we are opposites. We are complete opposites. And so I knew I had my paradigm of Simply Quilts. At that point, he had his paradigm of performing on stage and things like that. But when we got together, we knew we each had something important to bring to the table. But what specifically happened was that Simply Quilts got canceled. I called him about something else, and he started dancing around me. And I didn't realize he was doing a verbal dance. But bottom line was that I did not know this. Bernina had offered him money for a pilot. I was calling him about DVDs or something. And he said, hey, his dance was asking me, did I want to be a part of this whole thing with Bernina? Or did I only believe in being a one person show? And I said, no. I said, I think this would be interesting. But number one, we don't even know if we can work together on camera. That is a huge thing, probably more important than anything else. And so I said, tell you what, why don't I fly to La Vida? Let's see what we can do on camera together and decide if this is even going to work. And this is like no judgment, no, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Hey, you know? So I went there and we got in front of the camera. There, we did a little screen test, and within 10 minutes, we knew it was a go.
Mm-hmm.
It was incredibly smooth and easy. And it's funny because Justin was doing the taping of it. And then we went and put it on the computer and watched it. And we're like going, oh my gosh, this is going to work. So at that moment, I looked at them and I said, why aren't we doing this on the internet? Because it really doesn't feel good being canceled. It just really. And Ricky, I'm just a talker, and Ricky is a very laser focused person. Okay. And he said, oh, the internet. And I go, whoa, whoa, okay, let's go make a pro and con list on this. Now, this was in the infancy of internet providing streaming. This was in '07. And the internet won by 10,000 leaps and bounds. And look where the internet has us now with Netflix and all that. I mean, that's where I go at night. And so we invited Bernina, Martin Favre, and Gail Hillert to La Vida. And now I'm in California. We all went back and we produced this pipe, this dream of ours to Martin. And Martin looked at us and said, what are you going to do to to give us more money? What are you going to do to bring them back daily? And I'm looking at Ricky. I'm like, oh, what are we doing? And he goes, well, we'll write a quilt story. So
well, why not?
Why not? And so the next day, Bernina said, we're in. And they have been absolutely amazing to work with. And the beautiful thing is that it is my machine of choice and Ricky's. So we did the first season, and there you go. And the first season, right before we were going to go on set, Ricky said, I'm going to tell you something, and I don't want you to get upset about it. I just want you to hear it. And I believe in worrying about things when it's time to worry about things. I was standing in the stairwell with him. Oops. And he goes, to deliver this on the internet is going to cost us $350,000 a year out of Germany, or I don't know where it was. And I'm looking at him going, are you? And so our elves went to work and we found a place out of Germany that we could afford. This was the beginning of the streaming service. In fact, I think the only people that made television for the internet before us was honestly porn.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else was doing it, So I feel very proud that we crossed that chasm.
You were pioneers, and you didn't even know at the
Didn't even
time.
know.
No.
Yeah. Ignorance is bliss, Meg.
Alex, you've done so many episodes of the quiltshow.com. Do you have some favorites?
When I was with Simply Quilts, it was owned by Rob Weller and Gary Grossman, Weller Grossman Productions. And Rob said something to me at one point. He said, if you're from Chicago, you know Rob Weller.
Mm-hmm.
You probably know him anyways. He said, every guest is going to bring you a gift. You just don't know what it is. And I thought that was a really interesting statement because I'll get to some things I will not forget. But, even if a guest is on and it's something that I'm really not that interested in, there's always something to be learned. And that is the beauty of it. It's an ever-growing, evergreen playground that we get to play in. I think I hate doing this, but the one where we had the audience crying. No, there are two now I'm thinking. We did a field piece with Nola, and she had a stroke. She was a diver, and she came out of the water, and with all her disabilities, she was severely hit with the stroke.
Mm-hmm.
She learned how to quilt, and her quilt would put anybody under the table. Her quilts, they were just exquisite. And every
Mm-hmm.
taping, she and her husband would come, and it was just like, ugh. But I don't think anybody will ever forget Katie Fowler. And her whole thing is, she's out of the Denver area, is it's about the process. It's not about the finished product. That is a big thing to chew on. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She had a quilt on the wall that she was going to put, I don't know, somewhere in some art show. And Ricky and I were dressed like ding dongs. It was all about Alice in Wonderland because she's all about going down the, rabbit hole. And she went over to the wall. Nobody knew. The only people that knew were Ricky and I and the producer, and of course, Katie. Went over to the wall, took her quilt off the wall, and rotary cut it to pieces. And women were crying in the audience. I'm not even sure if there was a man there or not. And then she came back on later, and she had put it together, and it was better for the cause of the whole thing. I'll never forget that. I also think of Yvonne Porcella, who was our legend. We do legends.
Mm-hmm.
And she was battling cancer. And at the after set, she pulled her wig off.
Oh my.
And yeah, it was. And we actually sat and talked about it for an hour before she did it to make sure she was really okay with it. The diversity of the people that we have is amazing from all over the world. So it's kind of hard to say you're my favorite when I just have so many, but I will not ever forget Katie Fowler cutting up that quilt.
It is community in so many ways. So, Alex, I want to talk about your story as you recently survived cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Would you share your journey with us?
I would love to share my journey. And that was a big question that I asked myself on the get-go, because I can make this very quiet or I can make this very public. I am a third generation cancer person in our family, grandma, mom, myself. And I know with the guidance of my mom, who is deceased, I could go through this gracefully. I decided to go public not until I had a bunch of the information, because I found out prior to Thanksgiving, and I don't believe I went public till mid-January, because you don't know where the journey's taking you. It's a wicked web you go through. And I thought, I've got to go public because primarily, sorry guys, but my audience is women, and this is not just a female disease, but it is, although men can get it. And I thought, if I can get other people to go and get their mammogram, to pay attention, slash past the pandemic, pay attention to your body, et cetera, et cetera. That's why I am here on Earth. And now we're looking at for 6 months. How I discovered the lump is huge, people. I don't do self checks. I looked in the mirror one day and I went, what is going on my boob? It looked like cellulite. And I thought, oh, God is so cruel. I have cellulite on my butt. I have cellulite on my legs and now my boob. And so I touched it. I go, what is this? And there was, and I knew at that moment, and I, again, never did self checks. So I promptly got myself in. The process started. And I will tell you, people, the process is worse than the treatment because every single rabbit hole you go down has an ugly ending. When I went and saw my oncologist, he said 3 things to me. If you're going through this right now, just remember these 3 things. It is not a sprint. It is a marathon. And I didn't hear what he said, but this is not going to be resolved in 30 seconds. Okay. Number 2, don't go down the rabbit holes. Just don't do it. It's not going to help you. It's not going to get you anywhere. And number 3, this is a total body experience. So it's not just about your breasts. It's about everything. And I hung on to that. I was very, very, very lucky. I just can't even believe it because I was braced for the worst. I think everybody does that. I chose to have a double mastectomy, to have reconstruction, and I had to fight for that double mastectomy. They only wanted to do one, and I really had to fight for it. And it's my decision, and I'm glad I did. And how I do it is not how you do it, et cetera. And in fact, when we're done here, I'm going to go and get pumped up again. So the other thing my cousin said, who went through it, was that if you are diagnosed right now, it's like probably 2 months is the worst. And just understand it's the worst. And once you start treatment, it's so much better. I have to have no chemo. I have to have no radiation. And I said to my doctor, how was I so lucky? And she goes, you caught it early. So this is nothing to mess around with.
And how are you doing now?
I'm doing great. I'm doing well. I would say the 2 things that scared me the most was losing my creativity, which happened after 9/11. I just get stunned. And secondly, and this is so vain, I can't stand it, losing my hair. I mean, how stupid is that? But that was a big deal. And as it is, neither have happened. I am ever so grateful. And I'd say within 2 months, I'm going to be back like nothing ever happened. It's almost like it was a bad dream. Oh, I want to say this too. Thank you for those of you who have written me and have said, okay, I went and got my mammogram and I have cancer. Thank you. Another thing I want to throw in before I don't want to sound like I'm, the big pink, not pink, pink, ribbon here. My girlfriend, Sujata Shah, who's a quilter, who's been on the show, she says, I can share this. She had her mammogram and 3 months later found a lump. That shocked me.
You can't be careful enough.
Right.
Your words and experience are powerful. Now, we've talked about community. How did the quilting community come around you and support you?
I'm not a religious person. I am a very spiritual person. I have never in my life experienced prayer where within 24 hours of me sharing, I felt the weight of the world off my shoulder. I felt loved. I felt blessed. I felt it was extraordinary. And so, prayer works no matter what deity you are aligned to, it matters. And I felt it. Never mind all the little wonderful things that people did, but that was a power I have never felt in my life.
What words of encouragement do you have for others traveling the same health journey?
Don't get on Dr. Google. Just don't do it. Also, it is your journey. It is you. It is not the doctor's journey. It is not the surgeon's journey. It is your journey. And I felt really naughty fighting to have both my breasts removed. And that was based on my mom's history. And in the end, I'm ever so glad I did it. I did,
Mm-hmm.
but you're in it and you don't know what the heck, you don't know. It's so confusing. I thought my paradigm, you get breast cancer, you cut them off, and it's a day. No, there's so many. I mean, they're all about lumpectomies now. They're all about, listen to the options. And one other thing, when you go to appointments, take an advocate, and especially early on, because you're not going to hear what they're saying. It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to make sense to you or anything. John now is going with me, but in the beginning, I did not want him there because I wanted somebody with a partial medical background to hear what exactly is going on. And my oncologist said, which was interesting, he said, the first time you met with me, I know you're only retaining a quarter of what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Alex, thank you for sharing that. I know that there's somebody hearing this
I
who
know.
will make a difference too.
Can I say one thing? Can I say one thing?
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
really exciting. Well, I didn't have to have chemo, but I'm in my sewing room and I have touched fabric. So I know my creativity is there knocking at my back door.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Now I want to pivot a little bit on
Hmm.
what you just said. You had mentioned in passing that after 9/11,
Hmm.
you lost your creativity. Tell
Hmm.
us about what happened.
So I learned something through all that. I was not in California with my family. I was in Wisconsin with my mom and dad, and we drove back. And let me see, that was the beginning of September. Yeah, 9/11. I sat at my sewing machine and I was numb. I couldn't make a decision. I couldn't do anything. I was traumatized. Okay. Um, and then I went to Houston, which is the end of October, and they had put on a special exhibit at Houston. If you've ever gone, there's basically the huge vendor side and then there's the huge quilt side. And all down the middle, I don't even know how many football fields, all down the middle on two sides were 9/11 quilts.
Hmm.
And I sat there in wonderment going, how could they do this? And that's when I realized there's not a right or wrong with how creativity sparks you. It's just how it does. And when I face trauma, I shut down. When other artists face trauma, they explode with creativity. I just think that could be a college paper. You know that?
Yes, indeed. So these days, what inspires you?
Um, I'm doing a lot of handwork,
Hmm.
not hands, embroidery, things like that. Uh, just little things that I can pick up. I have to shout out to Sue Spargo. I mean, she inspires everything out of me. I got to shout out to Cindy Needham. What's inspiring me right now, I'm trying to draw this question in to make sense, is I'm taking classes to expose myself to other things because I'm kind of tired of what I've done for 40 years. So, but I know there's other really cool stuff out there. And I'm experimenting with all of it. Also, I want to throw in a little thing of when the pandemic started, I started going live Monday, Wednesday, Friday, free. This is on top of thequiltshow.com at 10 o'clock Pacific time. And we would do different projects together. And some of the projects, I didn't even know what I was doing. And in the middle, I'm going, oh, what if they find me out? Like my K facet quilt, that was the first one we did. We sold a bunch of bundles at the quilt show. And I thought, we're going to make a quilt together. And
Hmm.
people would say, well, what are we making? I go, I don't know. It's a mystery. And that's how I work. And halfway through, I went, oh my gosh, not only is this a mystery, it's a disaster. And so then I pulled it together and I started seeing what other quilters were doing around the world. It was so inspiring. And through all of this with those Monday, Wednesday, Fridays live, I had to go dark because of everything. I'm going to come back to it. And those people on that inspire me. I even know them, even though I don't know them. Was that a solid answer?
That was spot on.
Okay.
So let me ask, what's next for you, and what's your dream?
Oh boy. Um, See, I'm not that thoughtful. That's the problem. Um, where everybody thinks and they have their vision boards and they this is what I want and this is what I do. If I were to write my personal script, I would have never written it the way it has been written. Everything that's happened to me, I feel, is a gift. And what I, so I don't want to say, I want to do XYZ. I want to see what door opens. And when a door opens, I want to walk through it with my head high. And the whole cancer thing to me is that right now. When I get back in the saddle, we're going to do things with ties, probably the beginning of June. I was teasing it last October, and here we go, half a year. But I can't just pick one thing because this industry has been so good to me. Who would have known that Quilter Select would have come along with R&K Distributing?
Hmm.
So I'm more of a floater, and I'm willing to walk through doors and take risks. So I really am not a goal setter.
So we've talked about a lot of things, many things in our time together. Is there a question I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
No, in fact, I want to compliment you on this. I think you are doing a marvelous job of questions that I've not been presented with before. I super appreciate that.
Well, thank you, and I've
Mhm.
enjoyed your candidness and vulnerability, and just sharing so many things, Alex. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today, and just thank you so much for sharing your story.
Well, thank you. And I can't wait to meet you. I don't know where, or have we met before? Now that's when it really gets embarrassing.
No, we have not met in person, though throughout the time of doing so and so, I've had the honor of meeting several of our guests in person at
Uh-huh.
different events.
Uh-huh.
So the time will come.
Yes,
It
it
will
will.
definitely come.
Yes, it
If any
will.
of our listeners, Alex, want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Okay. I have an email that I'm more than happy to share. It's it's Anderson spelt weird. So listen, you guys. AlexAndrsn@gmail.com. And I got an e-letter today with somebody, and it just, what I can do for you, I will do for you. I will do for you.
Thank you again, and
Mhm.
continued health to you, Alex.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it, another story about someone just like you, someone for whom sewing and quilting is so much more than a hobby. It's a way of life. It's a connection to something bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to meg@soandsopodcast.com, or just complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, soandsopodcast.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I'd like to thank BERNINA for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.